a medium term, short term view. Possibly, short term is very, very difficult to predict. But I'll just make an attempt to, focus on medium to long term. We are at a very, very interesting juncture at the in the cycle, and I'll just briefly touch upon, what we are trying, how we are trying to position ourselves on the product side and trying to navigate. So essentially, InCred AMC side, what we are trying to do and achieve is that, we have got most of people in InCred AMC have spent a good amount of career globally in terms of getting some experience. Myself, I've spent, close to 5 years investing in India as an emerging market. In London, my colleague Praveen, who is there on this call, he has spent time in Middle East and Singapore. And one of my colleagues, Aditya Khemka, who joins from BlackRock, essentially has spent time in Brazil and London investing and specializing into healthcare sector. InCred AMC chairperson Punita Kumar Sinha, she toggles between India and Boston essentially. She's the CIO of Pacific Paradigm Advisors. She's also having a 30-year experience managing India dedicated and focused funds, erstwhile Blackstone and Oppenheimer. She's on the board of several publicly listed companies, which included Infosys, Lupin, Embassy REIT, just to name a few. More importantly, Punita is also chair of CFA Global Institute. So one of the key reasons why this is worth highlighting is that, most of us have got multiple experience of managing money over a full cycle, broadly. Out of my 17 years of my investment management slash equity research careers, 15 years I have spent managing money for private clients, specializing in PMS slash alternatives. And my last corporate job was with ICICI Prudential AMC, wherein I was head of PMS investments. One thing that, which is very, very worthwhile to highlight is that, that experience becomes very, very handy if you think about a cycle. And this is something that I would like to highlight because, till the time you have not seen a bear market or a bull market, you don't really know how to react and, how to sort of basically look at portfolios from a balanced view perspective. So what we essentially did in ICICI Prudential AMC was very, very unique and very refreshing. In January 2018, we returned 700 crores back to clients, by shutting down the fund. And that we did on a high in the sense that, I had already compounded at 37% CAGR from 2014 to 2018. So more often than not, I've been, asked this question several times that what was the need to return capital to clients. So what we have said is that, if you look at equity markets or equity as an asset class, one thing which is very, very clear is that, this is a very, very volatile asset class. And most of the equity investors who come to invest in equities for the first time don't realize this, but we can have, a 30, 40, 50% decline in the market. And it typically used to be a 1993, a 2000 or a 2008. Essentially, each of these instances, markets declined by 50%. This last year in March, essentially we saw a 30% decline. So it becomes very, very important to understand the nature of this asset class. And what we have seen over a period of time is that, medium to long term, of course, equity is a very, very rewarding asset class. So what we have said as a part of our philosophy is return on capital and return of capital both matter for an investor. And at times it takes, you have to take money off the table, basically. So later on, I'll just dwell upon it, how we are trying to, balance it out in our investment process. On the equity market outlook side, there are a few things that are very, very interesting and intriguing. So let us focus on the long-term trends here. I think so. What is worth highlighting today is that the world is broadly divided into two halves. On the one hand side, on one hand, you have got a developed market like US, which has done very, very well, particularly over the last decade. On the other hand, you have got emerging markets, which includes Brazil, Russia, India, China, possibly Turkey. Emerging markets have seen a lost decade broadly, and that gets reflected in dollar Nifty returns. So this is the chart that you see on your screen here. So broadly over last 12 years, and this is fairly a long-term chart from 2008 till 2021. What we see here is that dollar Nifty returns have been a 10%. This is not a CAGR chart. This is the absolute return of Nifty in dollar terms, and it is very, very simple to explain. Rupee was 40 rupees to a dollar in 2008, and today rupee is more like 75 rupees to a dollar. So your entire gains in terms of Nifty index has been taken away from the currency performance. Now, let me pose a question here to all of us. When do markets, sort of peak? So in our experience, markets peak when you have got peak earnings and peak multiples, right? As all of us are aware, we are at a peakish multiple, and a lot of people have tried to guess that why markets trend to trend higher as far as multiples are concerned. But this is not unique to India. This is unique to the world. Basically, all of us are aware that obviously US is also trading at an elevated multiple. And there are various points here, one of the points being that obviously we are moving to a lower interest rate environment, and the risk-free rate is moving down. So hence the multiples are elevated. The second thing which is worth highlighting is that earnings growth has disappointed, particularly in India. So since 2012, wherein Nifty EPS was 350, in FY20, Nifty EPS was 400. So that is like a 2% CAGR for earnings growth. For each of these years, earnings growth has disappointed. So we have had, 7 or 8 years now in a row wherein earnings growth has disappointed. And there is a hope. Every year we start on the sell side with the hope of 15% plus of earnings growth. But earnings growth has been half of the GDP growth broadly. Even if you have to, and forget about nominal GDP growth here, if you have to look at a GDP growth number, earnings growth has been half. This is the small and mid cap versus Nifty, what you see at the bottom of your screen. And what you'll find here is a very, very interesting phenomenon. Most of us look at the Nifty and say that, markets are elevated. But what a Nifty comprises of, essentially, today, India is one of the most concentrated markets, if I have to look at, on a 5-stock basis. So what we essentially mean is that, 5 stocks in the Nifty, which is a combination of Reliance, HDFC Limited, HDFC Bank, Infosys, and TCS. These 5 stocks comprise of 47% of the index, right? So this is the very, very highly concentrated index. And so essentially one needs to have a view on these 5 stocks if we have to have a view on half of the Nifty, basically. What we have also seen is that, since 2018 January, and this is a time wherein small and mid caps peaked, obviously the correction was very, very sharp in small and mid caps, and now they have started to recover. But what we see here is some sort of a catch-up trade happening between small and mid caps and the frontline indices. And what has happened is that, small and mid caps were trading at a premium. Here, small and mid caps are trading at a discount to large caps. So we are living in 2 separate worlds in the sense that, market trends are very, very divergent. Now, let me highlight some of the macro factors which are in favor of India. In my 17 years of fund management career, I have not seen India being current account positive a lot of time. And today, first of all, the currency is becoming a very, very important factor when you look from an asset allocation perspective. So let's say if I am an emerging market manager and if I'm allocating capital to various emerging market countries, The first thing that I would typically bother about in a low interest rate environment is the currency performance of that country per se, right? Now, it is a well-established fact that currency performance has got two variables which are very, very important to track. One is current account deficit, and the second one is fiscal deficit. As all of us are aware, we are living in a world wherein it is a world of relatives, and fiscal deficit and fiscal spending broadly in the US has been 15% of GDP. India is broadly at 13% of GDP at this particular point in time. Uh, but in India, what we have now started to see is a target fiscal spending. But current account is very, very important. So at broadly $50 to $45 of crude level, the Indian currency has been very, very stable. So what you see here in terms of currency performance of other emerging markets versus India, what you'll find here is that, Brazil, Russia, obviously the currency has been very, very volatile. South African rand has recovered, but clearly the yuan has appreciated against the dollar, right? So this is very, very important, because the last thing that I want to do is to borrow cheap money and lose money in currency. And that is the precise reason, one of the most important reasons why India has got a lot of inflows year till date from foreigners. Now let us step back and look at the domestic economy and essentially what were the problems in the domestic economy. First of all, the cost of capital has declined very, very sharply in India. If you look at the repo rate, and just to get the context here right, essentially, uh, during the global financial crisis post 2008, and this is the YV Reddy move in terms of interest rates, wherein essentially we saw a 4.75% repo rate. We are lower than that number at this particular point in time. If you have to look at the central bank action pre the pandemic, what was happening was that there was a tiff between the government and the Reserve Bank of India, wherein the Reserve Bank was cutting rates, but monetary transmission was not happening. And because of the COVID, we have seen monetary transmission happening in this country. And what we have seen is that the home loan rates, as well as the vehicle financing loan rates have declined by 1.5 percentage point, right? Obviously, it has started to reflect into automobile and personal loans. We are seeing some sort of a demand recovery there in terms of credit growth started to look very, very interesting. These two segments are very, very important or critical in any economy. So typically, what I have experienced as a fund manager is that in large economies, uh, if automobile and real estate doesn't do well, it is very, very difficult to understand that the cycle is about to turn. And we are at a very, very important juncture wherein automobile, obviously because of the cyclical recovery, BS6 transition, NBFC crisis has started to do well. Obviously, there is a change in narrative on the auto side from shared mobility to personal mobility. On the real estate side, a very interesting thing has happened. There is change in attitude of government in terms of lower stamp duty collection, change in attitude of builders in terms of selling or clearance of stock at 30-50% from peak prices. Rarely we have seen government taking a measure which has helped the industry. I think so that measure is in the right direction. And the third thing, which is more importantly happened, is mortgage rates are at 6.75%, which means that a new home buyer, and all of us have to think about possibly the average home loan borrower in this country, in the sense that that would be more like a 50 lakh rupees of dwelling unit size. You get a 2 lakh rupees of interest subsidy. So what it means is that that 6.75% rate is even lower for that kind of a borrower. So that leads us to believe that there is going to be clearance of stock. What we have also seen is anybody who's worthy of borrowing in a market place, and we have seen commercial paper rates declining to the tune of 3.5%. So a lot of AAA rated companies like HDFC Limited, Reliance, NTPC are borrowing the short tenure paper 70-day, 60-day at 3%, basically. So the key question here is that, whether we can, a corporation can borrow a slightly long tenure paper, let's say a 3-year paper, at what rate? So Bajaj Finance has raised a commercial paper 3-year at 4.5%, and Chola Investments has raised it at 5.5%. But the key here is that, the rates, the cost of capital has declined. Now, one way to think about it is that, the spread between AAA, AA, and A has not narrowed. So, if somebody believes in a thesis of, lower rates for longer, possibly this spread will also trend downwards. Now, a very interesting thing is happening on the banking side, and pre-pandemic, the reaction function of most of the banks in the country was to raise capital to have COVID-related provisioning, because banks were worried about essentially solvency in this cycle and not liquidity. Typically in every cycle, what I've experienced is that, liquidity is a factor that everybody worries about. But this was a cycle, COVID being a health crisis, wherein, banks were very, very scared that possibly we'll see a solvency-driven crisis across the globe and in India as well. So as a result of this, what the first reaction function of banks was to raise capital, and what we see here is the capital adequacy ratio of the banks. And what we are seeing is that most of the banks, that includes the private sector banks and SBI, what is getting displayed here, have created a 5 to 6 percentage point buffer in terms of capital adequacy. In the sense that, Kotak will normally function in terms of, 15 to 16% capital adequacy. And today Kotak is at more like 20 to 23% range. Axis is at 19. So what we see is that, the banks were expecting a sea of NPAs, and possibly, the economy has started to recover. So banks at this particular point in time, what we believe, possibly given the state of the economy, have a capital buffer at some particular point in time because of excess liquidity, which gets reflected here. This is the all-time high liquidity that you see in the system. And this is a combination of LAF, MSFs, LTRO, everything. At the same time, what we see is that, credit growth has trended downwards in this economy. So credit growth is more like 6%. So what we believe is that, over a period of time, banks will start to lend as and when they are comfortable. The question is that, when do banks start to lend? We believe that at this particular point in time, that is a precise reason why banks are becoming, the private sector banks are becoming very, very aggressive in terms of mortgage lending, because mortgages being a secured asset, that is where they are focusing on. Now, one thing that I would highlight is that, if the economy possibly is on the verge of turnaround, possibly mid and small caps have got one advantage here. One, obviously, is beaten down valuation from peak prices in 2018. Second, very, very large correlation to interest rate cycle in the economy. And what we have seen is that, the AAA, A and AA spreads have not, actually moved down. So what we are seeing here is that, as and when interest rates decline, mid and small caps do very, very well as a segment. And that is what we have started to see, off late in last 2-3 months. Possibly the rally is getting more broad-based, which is getting reflected in mid and small cap performance. So the correlation coefficient is more like, minus 0.7, which is a very, very good correlation coefficient to have, essentially. So this is what we wanted to highlight. So what does it mean for an equity market investor? The first thing that, possibly all of us have to bear in mind is that in a globally deflationary environment, Modi has been in a position to create land and labor deflation in this country, possibly. Land prices, if you look at, the factors of production, essentially land, labor, capital, and technology, uh, essentially there was inflation in land prices. So typically in any project, what you would find is that, land prices were as high as, 50-60% of the project cost. At this particular point in time, they are more tepid. I don't think so anybody expects land prices to move up very, very sharply. Labor, this is a blue collar wage inflation that essentially I'm pointing to. I don't think so there is an expectation of wage inflation in this country, because there is the unemployment rate is still very, very high. Capital was a problem pre-COVID, but we are in a phase wherein, cost of capital has already started to move down for companies which can borrow. The kind of rates that we are seeing clearly have been the cheapest cost of borrowing that we have not seen ever in this country. The fourth factor, which is technology, wherein, I think so Reliance has a big role to play here in terms of, creating deflation. So land, labor, capital, as an entrepreneur or as an equity investor, what we typically bother about is the spread between return on capital and your cost of capital of running a business. Historically, all of us know that, possibly equities have given, 15% sort of a return. That would be not the right kind of expectation to have going forward, since we are in a declining interest rate scenario. So the expectation should be more like a 10 to 12% range from the market. For that, and for that expectation to be met, earnings growth is a key variable. And now this comes obviously with a disclaimer that, corrections will happen. It is not that correction is not going to happen. Typically in a bull market, corrections are very, very swift. They happen in days, basically, as we are seeing. The volatility in other asset classes has already started to pick up. So what we see is that, equity would also see very, very swift periods of correction. But the key here is that, let's say Nifty level is more like, 14,000 thereabouts as we speak. You should be prepared with your asset allocation plan in terms of, so you have to decide today how your your equity weight should move. It is not that, possibly that we wait for a correction of 12,000 on the Nifty level, let's say on the index level, and then, we start to know, sort of revisit that plan and say that, possibly I'm going to allocate more when when, Nifty levels are lower. So I think so that is very, very important to remember. So if you are sticking to a plan, please have it planned, and, act on it as and when it is required. One very important thing which is happening in the economy at this particular point in time is that the reverse repo rate, and that is a rate at which the banks, park their money with the Reserve Bank of India, is at more or less at 3.3% at this particular point in time. The cost of funds of most of the private sector banks are in the range of 4.7 to 5. So what it essentially means is that, banks are losing by parking excess capital with the Reserve Bank, which is like 1.2 to 1.5 percentage point. As and when banks get more confidence on the economy, possibly they'll start to, sort of, look at, essentially lending, so that will lead to some sort of credit demand appetite. If we look at the sectoral composition of this rally, and we essentially started this rally by, essentially pharma was the leading sector when we essentially started this rally. It was very, very easy to understand that, healthcare is going to be a major beneficiary of this upturn when the rally started. Then there was a lot of question marks on IT as a sector, because initially it was perceived that there would be a budget cut in terms of technology spend. What we have seen is that, technology spends have accelerated. Today it is a well established fact that healthcare and IT, both sectors have benefited, possibly because of accelerated spending on both these sectors. There was a lot of disbelief in auto as a sector, but there the narrative changed from shared mobility to personal mobility. So then the equity market performance, moved from pharma to IT to auto. Lot of disbelief on the financial side, because people thought that there are going to be a lot of NPAs. Then financials participated. So this is a classic equity market, wherein at this stage in the cycle, the market is moving in rotation. And what we have also seen briefly, very very briefly, is that sectors which are out of flavor tend to see a correction of in the headline indices. Let's say pharma index correcting by 10%, possibly stocks correct by more than 15-20%. Those kind of corrections are a part of market. So we have seen that happening. Our belief is that going forward, consumer confidence, or FMCG as a sector has not done well. Our belief is that as things progress, as the lockdown eases, that is a sector that should do very very well. How we are trying to focus and position ourselves is by buying into good companies at a discount and buying into great companies at fair value. And we are trying to navigate through the market capitalization bit by having a multi-cap product. One thing from an asset allocation perspective that I would like to touch upon is that equity, like any other asset class, you should be overweight and underweight on equity. There are years wherein equity valuations become very, very euphoric, earnings growth, and it coincides with 2-3 years of good earnings growth. That is a time possibility to be on to be underweight on equity. Uh, every equity market, what I've seen is that essentially uh, it is very very important to focus on a combination of earnings growth and multiple expansion. We all know that in investing one should be buying fear and selling greed, but to put it to practice it becomes very very difficult. In theory it is very very easy to say. So when I was managing money in 2018 to return capital at a high point wherein the immediate experience was very very good in terms of returns, put that decision to practice was very very difficult at that particular point in time. Similarly, launching a fund in a down cycle, obviously it is a difficult decision. We thought that on 23rd of September 2019, when we launched the scheme, we thought that we are launching in a down cycle, but the pandemic happened. Little did we know that event like that can happen. But we have navigated well. From our perspective, what we say is that goal setting is very very important for clients. As long as your goals are met, from equity as an asset class, periodically it makes sense to tweak the asset allocation and take decisions accordingly. In terms of our decision making process, the way we think about our decision making process is that it has got three pillars. And what we say is that buying obviously is over popularized. It is well known to people, but you need to have a framework on buying. So to put it very simply, what we say is that we would like to focus on three buckets of businesses when we invest into. The first bucket is great business at fair value. The second bucket is good business at a discount, and what we have defined is one third discount to intrinsic value. The third bucket is to avoid investing into a bad business, because one of our jobs is to make a process which is very, very robust so that we can make less mistakes as a part of our process. The second very critical element of our investing process, decision making process, is sizing. And we think about sizing very, very critically as a part of our process. What you'll typically find is that most of the successful investors, either locally or globally, specialize in sizing and selling decisions. So actually buying is done by anybody and everybody, in the sense that everybody comes to the market to buy something. But how much do you buy and when do you sell is a very very important determinant of returns. So how we think about sizing is to size high quality companies wherein we have got limited downside. If we can assure that the set of companies that we are investing to into have got objectifiable downside, we are better off because upside can be taken care of. In terms of our sizing decisions, how we think about it, there is a 7 to 10% weight in a portfolio. There is a 3.5 to 5% weight in a portfolio. There is a 1.5 to 2.5% weight in a portfolio. How we think about it is that what is the risk to reward in a company when we are sizing. Sizing is a very critical aspect of investing. Most of the mistakes in an investment process happens when you get the sizing wrong, basically. That is very important to highlight. The third very critical element is selling. So when do you sell? Obviously you sell when there is a deviation from the original thesis. It is very simple to understand. You also sell when your incremental upside to downside, in our view, is less than 1:3. Why you require 1:3 incremental upside to downside ratio when you invest into equities? Typically, you require 1:3 because there are a lot of unknowns. Uh, I, as a fund manager or as an investor, cannot forecast anything and everything in an economy or in an investment thesis. So what typically happens when I was returning capital in 2018, little did I know that there could be a capital gain tax which can be slapped in the budget in 2019. So what it means is that at all points in time we have to think about that there could be certain things which are unknown. So this becomes very important. The way we think about it is that 50% of our job is to buy, to have a robust framework to buy, and 50% of our job is to size and sell at some particular point in time. From a client perspective, clients get a lot of buying advice from wealth managers, from fund managers. Clients typically don't get sizing and selling advice at all. I think so. This is a huge area of value add for us, basically, wherein we can add a lot of value to our clients by giving them sizing and selling advice. So the question came when we started the fund. Essentially was that how do you construct a robust framework, and this is a framework wherein we have built this framework by the mistakes that we have made in our careers as equity investors. One way of building a framework was to read a wonderful book and say that this framework is going to work. What we have seen is that if you can put a framework to practice, and if you can do a pre-mortem before you invest, rather than doing a post-mortem, it is always helpful. So what we did essentially was to build this framework, and it took us more than a year when we started off to put this framework into place in terms of having a scoring system. So this framework has got three buckets. We have divided this framework into two quantitative and qualitative factors. It has got three buckets: how to differentiate between great, good, and bad. The first parameter that we look at in a company is return on invested capital versus weighted average cost of capital. In a great business over a 3, 5, 10, 20 year, it always beats weighted average cost of capital. In a good business, for most of the business cycle, it will beat weighted average cost of capital, but there could be one-off years wherein it doesn't beat. A classic example being a company like Maruti, wherein sales declined by 30% last year. So what we saw is that it was a very brutal year for Maruti. What we also saw is that the stock price corrected from 11,800 to 4,000. It could be a Axis Bank, wherein corporate NPAs have resulted into a very elevated credit cost. What we have experienced in a market like India is that most of the sectors that people believe are secular give you a chance to position yourself, because most of the businesses go through their own business cycle apart from the stock market cycle. So most of the secular categories in this country, be it Page Industries or be it Jubilant Foodworks, which is Domino's Pizza of India, what we have seen is that Domino's from 2014 to 16 had negative same store growth. Neither the company nor the analysts believed that you could have a negative same store growth in that company, but it happened. I don't think so anybody forecasted that Page Industries could have a negative volume growth here in a country like India, which is severely under penetrated in terms of innerwear. The same is true of, things like United Spirits, wherein, it is into a secular category. But we keep on getting these opportunities wherein, there are some sectors which are out of flavor, be it, pharma, let's say from 2018 to 20, it was out of flavor. Suddenly in 1 year, pharma gave all the return. So what we have seen is that, you get these periodic periods wherein, you can position yourselves. The second thing that we look at in a company is capital structure. And by efficient, we essentially mean a combination of two things: negative working capital and debt to equity of less than zero point 0.5. In a good business, typically the capital structure is average, wherein it could be zero point 0.5 to 1. And what we call inefficient is that you have to resort to leverage to generate or to beat weighted average cost of capital in a business. So that is what is inefficient. As a result of this, a lot of companies or a lot of sectors tend to get excluded in our analysis because they don't score or they don't qualify well. So all the businesses wherein you have to inherently resort to leverage, which is a combination of, things like real estate or, commodity businesses wherein you have got dollar cost of borrowing, need to be looked at. We would typically tend to exclude all these businesses in our analysis. Uh, Cash flow is very, very important. We would essentially look at two things in cash flow. We would look at earnings conversion, EBITDA conversion to operating cash flow of 70%. Uh, it is very, very important to look at companies from a cash flow perspective. We have learned it by training and practice over a period of time. How did we derive this 70% number? Was essentially looking at top two quartile of our universe of roughly 600 companies, wherein we focus on 300 companies, and out of those 300 companies, they have an average conversion of 70%. The second thing that we would look at is a cash flow based valuation matrix, which is operating cash flow yield, which is operating cash flow divided by enterprise value. Essentially, that brings in a lot of discipline in our investing approach. There are times, and a very simple way to think about it is that if a sector is out of flavor, you could have cash flows improving, but optically the PE multiple is going to look very, very expensive. And it happened in MRF, let's say 4 months back, wherein the enterprise value of the company was 21,000 crore and your operating cash flow was 2,000 crore, basically. So what we saw is that, a company like MRF, which is a market leader in its category, having a very, very dominant positioning, replacement demand, it has been a multi-bagger. What we saw is that, it was trading at 9% operating cash flow to enterprise value. What we also, and the right way to think about it is that, a lot of businesses will make a higher high, in the sense that MRF is going to sell more tires over a cycle. So what it means is that, we are essentially looking at payback period for a equity investor, to define it very, very simply. We can find some of the times we can find businesses which are trading at valuations which are very, very attractive on a cash flow based valuation metric. 3.5% is our cutoff here, essentially. So that brings in a lot of discipline in our investing approach in terms of enterprise value to operating cash flow. Covenants are very, very important. Why would we look at covenants as a part of our research process? Because in every cycle, what I've experienced is that first credit moves, then bond moves, and then equity moves subsequently. If you monitor credit very, very carefully, the way we look at this in our investing process is to look at a credit rating note and to understand what is the debt service coverage ratio, what could be the fund based, non fund based limit. All of this we get it in a credit note. It is now readily available. So it is our endeavor to understand more about credit in the set of companies that we invest into. Growth obviously is very, very important. The way we think about growth is that in every sector, typically what happens is that, there are, let's say, 10 players in an industry. Top three players would be 50% in terms of market share, but they could be having a disproportionately high profit pool share. As a result of this, just to give you an example here, something like a Maruti, which everybody knows that, it has got 50% odd market share, but it has got 65% of industry profit pool share. And this is true of most of the businesses. Now, this profit pool share could have various reasons. It could be brand, it could be economies of scale, so on and so forth. So our endeavor is to invest into leaders when we look at companies in a down cycle. So 65% of our companies as we speak today would be leaders. They are number one companies in their particular sector. Even if we are investing into a small company, 20% of our companies are challengers. So they are number two. So I would like you to think in terms of leader and challenger, either the best company in the sector or the second best. Why would you buy a challenger? You would buy a challenger if you don't have a choice of buying a leader. Very, very simple. Sometimes the challenger can dislodge a leader. And this is what we have seen, happening sometimes as well. So on the qualitative side, we focus on competitive advantage, identifiable and sustainable. This has been a bucket wherein not many businesses are available in India to invest. uh, this is an area wherein brands are getting heavily disrupted. Think about a Dollar Shaving Club versus Gillette here, or think about platform business like Amazon, which is going to enter into the most profitable categories. This is a very, very challenging aspect of investing in India because you get elevated multiples, not necessarily identifiable and sustainable competitive advantage in companies. Identifiable but fading, lot of businesses that fit in here. Think about branch banking versus digital banking. How relevant is branch banking in today's world? Think about a PVR, possibly OTT versus exhibition business that a PVR has. So it helps us to think that whether this fade rate is going to be very, very fast. Think about a electric vehicle versus a ICE engine here. Obviously, in a bad business, you cannot detect any competitive advantage. Pricing is very, very simple to understand, whether it beats inflation, whether it is market pricing or a price taker. Companies like ONGC or any other commodity company or steel company, possibly they are like more like price takers. Character of management, this is a very, very interesting and a very, very important one. The way we think about character is that first of all, you need to have a lot of experience in terms of understanding the same company over a market cycle. So you should have seen the management behavior in a bear market and a bull market. So this is where candor becomes very, very important. The way we look at and how we measure character is a combination of various things like contingent liability as a percentage of net worth. We would look at management remuneration as a percentage of PBT, related party transactions, pledge shares, so on and so forth. Alignment is very important when we invest into companies, simply because we'll always be minority shareholders when we invest into businesses. From an alignment perspective, we also monitor return on invested capital, how it is moving in the set of companies that we invest into. The last one is dependence on external variables, whether it is highly regulated, how is the regulator's position in the sector. Now the question comes that this is a good framework to have, but how do you practice this framework? So what we have done is develop a very, very simple scoring system wherein for every, these are 10 attributes that you see on your screen. For a great attribute in a company, we'll give a score of 3. For a good attribute, we'll give a score of 2. For a bad attribute, we'll give a score of -2. So this becomes a very, very objective score-based system when an analyst starts to research a company. Essentially, this is a process that we follow. Theoretically, the score can be as high as 30. A lot of great companies that anybody can think of, possibly the score is more between 24 to 26. We are yet to stumble upon a company wherein the score is higher than 26. So this becomes a very, very dynamic approach. It is very, very easy to differentiate between bad and good because it is more like black and white. It becomes difficult to differentiate between when companies move from good to great, and that good to great is always questionable. And that is a precise reason we don't want to overly penalize companies in our scoring system when they move from good to great. So the score differential between good to great is 1 point, whereas the score differential between bad to good is more like four points essentially. But the key here is that each and every company that goes into the portfolio, we would first do a scoring on that company, discuss it in the investment committee, and then arrive at a conclusion. How it helps us, the process is very dynamic. How it helps the analyst, is very, very simple. The analyst knows that if the qualifying score is 20, and if this company, if the score that the analyst has scored on the company is more like 10, 12, it is not going to likely make it to the portfolio. Obviously, this has to result into performance, and the way we think about market capitalization, this is a multi-cap strategy. It navigates between large, mid, and small cap. Since we are managing money on a philosophy and a framework, we would like to be market cap agnostic. What we are trying to do and achieve for our clients is to strike a balance between earnings growth, return on invested capital at a portfolio level, which is very, very high from an Indian standpoint, which comprises of good companies. More importantly, we don't want to run solvency risk for our clients. By that, I essentially mean if you have to knock off financials out of the portfolio companies that we hold, and you look at debt to equity at a portfolio level, it is a net cash portfolio that we have constructed. Some of the companies that you will see here, which have got debt, is possibly a company like United Spirits or Bharti, or something like a Biocon, wherein we think that debt levels are manageable. A lot of small cap companies would be net cash. A company like Matrimony, a company like Thyrocare, essentially, these are net cash companies. On a valuation metric side, on a trailing PE basis, we have slightly more expensive than the market. Market is more like 34 trailing PE. We are at 38, and our average market capitalization is $7.2 billion. What you see here is a good mix of companies wherein a Bosch is a market leader, a Maruti is a market leader, a Linde is a market leader, a United Spirits and Matrimony are market leaders. Bharti was a market leader, now it is a challenger, but more importantly, it is still gaining market share. So this is something that I would like to highlight. Now, a very critical element of our strategy has been consistency in the way we have generated alpha. What we are targeting is a very, very simple portfolio of companies wherein we can toggle between good and great companies. The way we measure our greatness quotient of the portfolio, 65% of our companies, and that coincides with the leadership position or the pole position that we have. But we are slightly careful buying companies in a down cycle. If you look at a company like Bosch or a MRF or a Maruti, we would have bought most of these companies in a down cycle. And that has led to reasonable outperformance in a very, very difficult and a challenging year, which has been very, very difficult and challenging to navigate. So what we have been in a position to deliver is a decent alpha over and above the benchmarks. And hopefully, by bringing in a lot of focus on the strategy, we could be in a position to add a lot of value to the clients. So I'll just take a pause here. Most happy to address the questions. Either on markets or on the portfolio.
Hi, Aditya, let me start with one of the common questions. And in fact, I know of some clients also. So since 10,800, 11,000 levels of Nifty, some of the clients have been on the fence. And when we say that, selling or exiting the market also, or rather profit booking in the market is very, very important. So in the last 6 months, this 11,000 journey has only been on the upside. So where do you think would be and most of the stocks right now also, if you talk about HDFC or most of the other stocks also, are all-time high. So where do you think the strategy of an exiting or rather profit booking should play out?
Sure. So things have to be looked in a context. Essentially, if you look at, one part of our strategy is to focus on companies wherein a 5-year return has been, sideways. I mean to say these are all good companies, but a 5-year has been, possibly a zero return, right? So you can find opportunities, for example, if I to look at our portfolio, we have got a ITC, we have got We have bought into Sundaram Finance, wherein a 5-year return was zero. We bought into United Spirits, wherein 4-year return was zero. Possibly, if you look at a ITC stock price chart, right? For example, the high was like more like 380. If you look at a Bosch stock price chart, it was like 25,000, right? One of our core strategies is to focus on value, or being slightly more sensitive about valuation in the set of companies. Obviously, one needs to also focus on catalyst when one looks at or talks about value. Obviously, we are aware about the catalyst as well. So from a market timing perspective, one has to take a view on the cycle. uh, in terms of the business cycle is started to look up at this particular point in time. And the very simple, straightforward answer is that if you have to look at market returns, right, or if you have to look at the face of markets that we have gone through in terms of particular businesses, let's talk about HDFC Limited, for example, right? So in the previous cycle, there was, one would have said that, there is a competition. Who is the next HDFC in the making, right? So people would have said it is India Bulls, or it is, let's say, Piramal, for example, right? Now, the question is that which is the next HDFC? There is only one HDFC, right? So it is very, very clear. Who is the challenger to Indigo, let's say, as a airlines, in the sense that Indigo is 100% of the profit pool as we speak today. Whether, so one of the key very important benchmarks when we look at companies in a down cycle is that yes, there is a down cycle. Everybody knows that housing as a segment was not doing well. But what was happening to market share of, let's say, a United Spirits or a HDFC? Obviously, they were busy consolidating their market shares, right? So what it leads us to believe is that, one should think slightly long term, basically, or a medium term, which is like, more like 3 to 5 years. If you think about the markets from a 3 to 5 year perspective, and if you think about the construct in terms of dollar nifty returns, or you think about what is the upside in the market, let's say what is a 3-year upside. So my base case would be possibly there is a 30-40% upside on a 3-year basis, right? What is the correction that possibly we all are waiting for? Possibly it is like a 10-15% correction. So the risk to reward is more like 1:3, which is not a bad risk to reward to have. And it also has to be looked in context of the other alternatives within asset classes which are available, right? So if you think about gold as an asset class, for example, at this particular point in time, gold has had a very good year last year, right, which is more like 20% plus. Real estate, obviously, things are looking up, but in terms of pricing, possibly it is going to take a lot of time before the inventory gets cleared, right? You look at debt as an asset class. What are the returns that are possibly there? So my view is that within equity there are enough opportunities. It is too early to call it that whether we have sort of peaked in terms of market performance. The economy has just started to look up. And let us also be mindful what has happened in US was a combination of a lot of US companies doing buybacks, basically, in the sense that companies were very, very smart about their capital allocation, in the sense that Apple, Intel went and raised debt. These were debt-free companies, net cash, and they extinguished equity, right? Possibly a similar kind of thing can happen, but my core belief is that possibly if you give money in hands of Indian entrepreneurs at 3-4%, it is a very good advantage to have. None of us have seen that happening in the past.
Aditya, there's another question from one of our clients, Bhavesh Singhi. Says that high P's are being justified by excess liquidity right now. But will excess liquidity also result in increased earnings due to increased consumption? If yes, then shouldn't P's be lower than current P levels, or resulting into a correction of in excess of about 10%?
I would say that is a very smart and intelligent question. I wish that I was so qualified. We are living in a world wherein Robert Schiller has recently discarded his, CAPE valuation as a theory. It is a very, very difficult question to answer. I think so. We are still living in a world wherein, central banks are the biggest hedge funds in this world. I think so. All of us acknowledge this fact. It is a very, very difficult. I think so. What is very easy, to answer, just to put things into perspective, that still we are at a juncture wherein, mean reversion is a play in emerging markets versus developed markets. And obviously, some of the people don't believe that, that rates can continue to stay here for longer. Most of us believe that, rates can, quickly, there could be inflation, and, rates can continue to move up. But our view is that, possibly, it is going to have. And sometimes it makes me wonder, for example, if you are forecasting, or if you are doing a DCF on a company, let's say, what is the risk-free rate that you assume in a Spain, let's say, wherein the 10-year is negative, right? So it is a very puzzling world. But the key context here is that, there are some companies which are, and that is why taking a market call is very, very difficult. Taking a 20-30 stock portfolio call is reasonably easy, basically. So the way we think about it is that, don't worry too much about the market at this juncture. And by the way, there could be a bigger bubble in debt than in equity at this particular point in time. Let us all not forget that, because we are living in a world wherein Peru has raised a 100-year bond at 3.17%, and the pigs are trading at negative yield or something like that. So it is a combination of both. Markets peak when you have got peak earnings and peak multiples. Yes, multiples are elevated. That is why I qualified my statement that or the market view, that you need earnings growth to come through. If earnings growth disappoints, obviously the markets will correct.
Another one from Mr. Anup Mittal is very straightforward question. Is like, at this juncture, at this time when the market is all-time high, what should be the strategy which one should aim for? Should he sell, hold, or buy? If there is one thing that we need to say, what would be our house view or your view?
Sure. So a very simple view to have today is that, you should have some element of cash as a part of your strategy. It depends upon how much you are allocated to equity. So let's say you have got 100 rupees. Typical equity allocation ranges from 20 to 50, 60% in depending on the risk appetite for clients. Out of that 20, 60%, possibly 70 to 80%, you should be still invested in equities as an asset class. You can have 20 to 30% cash out of your equity allocation. Please don't be underweight equity. Please don't be, let's say, half of what you need to allocate. I don't think so. This is a right juncture to have, and or have a plan, work towards a plan. If the market's correct, put that money to work. I'm sure that it is going to be one of the asset classes wherein, I meet a lot of clients wherein clients have started to ask me that whether, you can beat debt returns, because I don't have anywhere else to park at this particular point in time. I think so that is a much easier call to take. I'm sure the asset class is not going to disappoint you. So it is hold / buy on a correction, just to be very clear.
Any other questions? Please feel free to type it. We will be more than happy to address it. As of now, can't see any other questions coming up, but if there is any, please feel free, don't hesitate to ask any questions.
And from a, just from a, just to add it, from a product perspective, what we have done is that, PMS is a beautiful product because, essentially we can have a one-on-one discussion with the clients, and, we can give them a solution in the sense that, we can have a STP based option, or we can, you know, possibly, depending on the risk appetite of the client, you know, we can possibly do some bit of customization there. On the AF side, what we have done is that, you know, we have only called for half of the capital. On top of that, this being a closed-ended fund, we have got flexibility to create cash for clients periodically if we feel that markets are overheated. But the key here is that, you know, correction can just come and go in 15 days, basically.
Fair, Aditya. I don't see any other questions coming up. I think that would be it. I think we should close then.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you so much for attending, all the clients. One second, I think I just got one question. Any views on infrastructure as an sector? Infrastructure sector views has been.
So it is not a core area of focus for us as a strategy, but you know, safe to assume that, you know, possibly, you know, it wouldn't qualify on the filter side. But having said that, you know, there are very few companies in the sector. You know, it is very, very easy to, you know, identify the companies that will do well in the sector. The flag bearer of infrastructure has been L&T. 10-year return has been very, very minuscule. I think so. What we would like to believe is that, you know, the capital for the next cycle is going to be with the efficient players. One thing which is very, very clear is big is becoming bigger in most of the sectors. So I would say that, you know, it makes sense to stick to the most efficient companies or the leaders in the sector. It is as simple as that.
Any other questions? If not, then we will call it the day. Thank you all the clients for attending the session on a Friday evening. I hope you enjoy your weekend. Have a great one. Thank you, Aditya, for taking this wonderful session. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot on behalf of InCred AMC. Thank you so much.
Just to add on, if you want any other one-on-one discussions also, we can reach out to our RMs as well, and we'll be more than happy to get into more details. Thank you so much.
Thanks.